Welcome to the podcast where together, every Monday, we explore hospitality in its very broadest sense. From culture and cooking, cocktails and coffee, nutrition and farming, politics and animal welfare, organic and sustainability, family and business, entrepreneurship, and much, much more. Come and learn with me, Mark Cribb, about where our food and our drink comes from, and the businesses and, more importantly, the human beings that thrive on where we decide to spend our time and our money. Sign up to our weekly newsletter at humansofhospitality.co.uk and hit subscribe on your podcast player of choice. Imagine buying a fresh loaf of bread, cutting it into two, and immediately throwing half of it in the bin. You eat what's left, and then you buy another loaf the next day and do exactly the same thing again. It sounds pretty crazy, doesn't it? And not something any of us would do deliberately. But across the world, that is what the human race is doing. And okay, it's not quite half, it's actually 44%, which is still an eye-watering proportion. 44% of all the bread we produce is not eaten at all. And that is why Toast Ale was born. Set up in 2016, it sells delicious award-winning beer using surplus bread, and its open source recipe has inspired brewers from South Africa and Iceland to Brazil and New York. And its big, hairy, audacious goal is to convert the whole of the UK's brewing industry to its way of thinking in the next 15 years. So whenever we raise our glass, we'll all be helping to save the planet. Now, Rob Wilson is Toast Ale's CEO, and before he joined the Toast team, he'd already got a serious track record in social entrepreneurship. And this includes spending his mega moon honeymoon in Africa, gathering stories about other inspirational entrepreneurs with his wife. Get ready for a life-enhancing conversation which encourages us all to have fun as we help build a better future for planet Earth. Okay, Rob Wilson, thank you so much for sparing the time to be on the podcast. Hugely appreciated. Chief Toaster, yes. CEO at Toast Ale. Can you just explain for people listening, where on planet Earth are we, please, Rob?
So we, Mark, are in central London, just on the South Bank behind the Globe Theatre.
Amazing. And we've got a boardroom to ourselves, which is very grand, a little bit echoey for anybody that's listening.
Yeah, we're not in a toilet, despite the fact that it might sound like we are. It is a little bit echoey. Hadn't thought about it before recording a podcast in here.
No worries.
And there might be the occasional background noise.
It's probably still better than us being in a toilet, to be honest. And quite often I do these in restaurants and bars, invariably where I find myself. They never spend any money back of house. It's all front of house. So I've sat in cupboards and storage rooms and all sorts. Albeit, I've also had the pleasure of doing an interview in a field being nuzzled by cows when I was in a field with 800 cows. But that's a whole another story. So this is great. I've got beer and a big desk. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'm genuinely really excited to come and chat to you. I think the stuff going on at the moment in the hospitality industry, food and drink industry, in vogue is the wrong word for such a serious industry, but food waste and climate change and all that kind of stuff. So I'm excited to come and chat to someone really to understand more about that, but also to see a positive side of what you're doing with it. And we'll come back to that, but we'll dart a little bit around in the conversation. But for people who don't know Toast, just to give a little bit of context, what do you do? How big a business is this? How much beer do you brew? And then we'll zip off in some different directions.
Yeah, so we like to say we're on a mission to prove the alternative to food waste is freaking delicious and pint-sized. So we brew our planet-saving beer using yesterday's bread, fresh surplus bread from bakeries, from the sandwich industry. We replace 1/3 of the malted barley in the brewing process with yesterday's bread. There's a slice of surplus bread in every pint or can of our beer, and we pour 100% of our profits into environmental charities fighting food waste. We do shamelessly have a lot of puns, and we think we're the best thing since you know what.
You do. You are super spun. Let's get wasted on waste or something was another one, I think, wasn't it? Or you don't use that anymore. Now
that's basically, we have to be a bit careful. Yeah. We have to, we say, in fact, in response to that, we say bread shouldn't be wasted and neither should you.
Yeah. So that's a much more grown-up way of putting it from the...
Getting wasted on waste was basically how Tristram, whose idea it was to start Toast, basically sold it to me when he came back from a trip to Brussels, where he'd just tried a beer that was brewed with surplus bread, and Tristram's environmentalist and campaigner. And he's a good friend, and he kind of said, "Rob, let's start up a beer company and get wasted on waste." So that's kind of where that came from.
What a genius idea! But there's a connection between bread and beer going back a long time.
Yes. Yeah. So as well, I guess, as this circularity of using surplus bread in the beer and embracing the circular economy, there's also this circularity behind the origins of brewing. And so the beer that Tristram had tasted in Brussels was called Babylon, because the first ever beer recipe dates back to Babylonian times and had bread as a core ingredient. And for millennia, bread was routinely used as an ingredient in beer production. So bakeries and breweries would partner up at a very local level. You'd be able to use the carbohydrate, the wheat, ultimately, in the bread to extract the sugars and create alcohols. You're not using the yeast, you're using the carbohydrate. So kind of bringing that, sort of the origins of beer production to today, whilst tackling a very urgent environmental issue, we think is so
you're just going back in time, really. That's what that used to happen for that reason. There'd be a local baker,
it just made sense, brewer, kind of common sense.
They would work together.
One of those common sense things that we've really forgotten about, and so we're trying to bring that craft back, whilst the craft beer industry is thankfully booming and people are wanting delicious local craft beer. We're using that growth to also try and tackle an environmental issue.
And interesting that symbiotic kind of relationship used to exist, because that's the same in farming in so many ways. This kind of monoculture approach now that we've got of only growing one product on the land, and it used to be that the farms would complement each other, and I can't remember the details, but the chicken eats certain thing that's in the cow poo, and the cows poo on the land and grow the grass, and all. It used to be that much more holistic approach. So it's interesting that in other areas of food, I suppose, we're going back and going, well, I never, what people used to do actually just used to make sense, and this is the same.
Totally. And then for us as well, all of the spent grains. So creating a beer, I'm sure you've seen beer brewed. For those that might not have done, it's effectively like almost creating a very watery porridge. You're kind of using malted barley and a lot of water at the end of the brew, because once you've got all of the sugar and the flavour out of the barley, you're still left with the spent grain, the kind of sludge at the end. And then we feed all of the spent grain to the local cattle. So again, there has always been this circularity and making use of all of the resources. But a lot of breweries don't even do that, the very kind of basics of making sure that you would use that surplus, this really protein-rich byproduct, ultimately, from the beer industry to make sure that you can actually feed that to local cattle. There's some great social enterprises as well. Good Things Brewing down in Sussex, a brewery there that are then turning their spent grain into a flour, processing the spent grain into a protein-rich flour, which is pretty cool.
Amazing. Yeah, it seems to make sense, doesn't it? So that we'll come on to food waste shortly, but the more we can reuse and use and less waste and all that kind of stuff. But before we do that, any type of bread? Is this, can you use granary? Is this a white bread only?
I guess I wish we had this romantic image of all of us on pedal bikes going to artisanal bakeries and getting sourdoughs and baguettes and filling up the basket. The reality is that we're using commercial surplus bread, typically white sliced, brown sliced, wholemeal sliced bread. And that's perfect for brewing. Typically, it's quite carbohydrate and sugar rich, and low in salt and low in other flavors as well. Whereas when you're brewing with something like a sourdough, it's really high in salt. If you kind of, you've baked sourdoughs, it might have like 3% salt content, and that will really come through in the brew. Obviously, it gives a great flavor to a sourdough. Sourdough without salt, not particularly delicious, but that will really come through. Good for maybe a dark beer, a porter, a kind of creates a bit of a salted caramel kind of note if you used a bread with high salt content. But any like a lager or a pale ale with sort of a salt taste is going to really linger, and is not a good thing.
Okay, so it's probably a much better use of all that really naff white bread then.
And obviously we're totally agnostic as to where we get the surplus from. We have had great partnerships with folks like the Real Bread campaign that are doing brilliant work to promote real bread and local artisanal bakeries. But a lot of the bread that we're using isn't necessarily part of that kind of approach. And we take a lot of bread from the sandwich industry. So this is where it's really crazy. And as Brits, we're addicted to our sandwiches day in, day out. The end slice, the heel of a loaf of bread, surplus to requirements, never ends up on your pre-packed sandwich in a coffee shop or a supermarket. And all of those end slices, of which there are literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions every day, are just going to waste. And so it's day fresh bread that we're able to backhaul to the brewery and brew with. So it's not like it's a few days old or it's kind of, moldy bread from the back of the bread bin. This is day fresh, white, sort of retail bread, but it's the crusts typically that we're using.
Seems bonkers, isn't it? I read a statistic, 44% of bread is wasted. Is that true? That
it is true.
Mind.
It is absolutely nuts, eh? So, so there's some bakeries that it's particularly common in continental Europe, actually, that will take all of the crust off a loaf of bread and you just have a loaf that is completely crustless. Right. When you do that, you actually eliminate 40% of the bread before it's even left the bakery. And so when you're talking about things like the sandwich industry where the end slice is coming off, and often that's just hand-picked when they take the end slice off, and they might accidentally take the next slice as well, and you're losing kind of 15% of the loaf before it's even been put into anything. And then throughout the supply chain, there's wastage as well, either through over-ordering, under-ordering, consumers, us at home, being guilty as well. And so it's the highest food waste that there is. And by focusing on this, creating a delicious solution with beer, which people it just resonates. People get it, even if they have no idea how beer is brewed or how bread is baked. People understand this connection. There seems to just be this innate understanding that beer is liquid bread. And so we can highlight this issue, which we hope starts to raise awareness about a much bigger issue, which is the fundamental issue of food waste more broadly and the environmental impact that's having.
Yeah, because you give all of your profit to charity, is that right?
We do, yeah. So we built the whole business on kind of 4 founding principles. Number 1, absolutely delicious beer. You're sipping it for yourself. Hopefully you can vouch for the fact.
I'm going to talk about it more in a minute. It's lovely. Yeah.
And then they kind of got these 3 sort of cuddly principles behind the beer. And ultimately, that's eliminating commercial bread waste, trying to raise awareness about food waste, and then pouring all our profits into environmental charities. And so it's 1% of our revenue or 100% of our profits, whatever is higher. At the moment, sadly, 1% of our revenue is higher than 100% of our profits. Hopefully one day, 100% of our profits will be millions of pounds. But right now we've donated £35,000 to charity, which obviously we're super proud of. Hope that will continue to rise and we can create this really sustainable income stream for Feedback, which is the main charity that we support. And I guess candidly, it's not particularly kind of sexy charitable work to fundraise against, tackling food waste where it's not like you're trying to save the polar bear. It's not as appealing maybe to a regular kind of punter on the street to start donating to. They're really speaking truth to power, trying to change government policy, trying to change retail behavior, trying to change consumer behavior. And when you're speaking truth to all of us, it's pretty tough to then fundraise. Corporates are reluctant to donate. Government might be feeling a bit bad. We as consumers getting told what to do. And so for us to be able to provide this sustainable income stream for Feedback to do the incredible work they're doing is so important.
Yeah. So again, I'm guessing a lot of people won't have heard of Feedback. I hadn't until I was looking into them last night. I fell in love with them instantaneously. I thought it was brilliant, and we'll talk about some reasons why. So, what is it they do, and why is food waste so important?
Yes, so that all sort of, I guess, coming back to Tristram, and so how Tristram and I know each other is I used to run an organisation called Ashoka that supports social enterprises, social entrepreneurs. Tristram was one of the social entrepreneurs we were supporting because he really pioneered what it is to, I guess, understand this connection between the catastrophic impact of food waste and environmental climate change, where previously people connected the fact that food was going to waste, people are going hungry in the world. That, of course, is a super serious issue. But what is arguably more impactful when it comes to the environment is the fact that we're causing huge amounts of deforestation for the food industry. The food industry has by far the biggest impact on climate change. People think in isolation of the energy industry or the transportation industry, but obviously it's the food that we're flying and shipping all over the world and using a lot of energy in things like refrigeration. And 1/3 of the food that we produce goes to waste. So over 1 billion tons of food every single year is going to waste. So there's this insane inefficiency in our food system. But obviously people like you and I believe in absolutely delicious, high quality food and drink. It's really important to enjoy your food and drink. And so we're certainly not saying to cut that out, but where there's an issue is this wastage. And so why can't we just create a much more efficient, delicious food and drink industry where we can get rid of that 1/3 waste that would have a knock-on impact, a positive impact on the environment, and we can create a much more effective system. And so what Feedback are doing is really trying to tackle that at multiple levels. So the fact that people like Jamie Oliver and Hugh Fernie-Whittenstall have kind of done TV series about these issues and have brought it to mainstream kind of consciousness is thanks to a lot of the hard work behind the scenes that Feedback have been doing, writing reports, getting the data available, raising the issue, getting it as a government policy as well as an international policy. So the Sustainable Development Goals have food waste as a target now globally that we need to address. Big retailers like Tesco's and Walmart, big global brands, have food waste as one of their top 3 company objectives now to tackle food waste. And you've got other huge companies like IKEA that actually are big restaurant groups. People think of IKEA as just no,
they always think meatballs now.
but yeah, it's kind of those meatballs, and they have sustainability and food waste as well top of their agenda. And so again, so much of that is thanks to the work that Feedback are doing, lobbying and I guess creating a bit of a thorn in the side of a lot of these big businesses, but also for us as consumers, where they've raised awareness about things like wonky and ugly fruits and vegetables that, again, I think most people are aware of these days, and how ridiculous it is to not be served a apple or a carrot because it's just a little bit of a funky shape. They've managed to mainstream that, and now big retailers are even monetizing the fact that they're deliberately selling you a wonky carrot.
Yeah, it's a crazy world, isn't it? I was with Guy Watson a couple of weeks ago from Riverford Organics, having a good old chat with him about the bonkersness of, fascinating, the bonkersness of, I suppose, I don't even think it's selling the consumer what they want. I think it's selling the consumer what the supermarket thinks they want. So we was talking specifically about baby gem lettuce, for example, and the fact that I think the average consumer sort of turns up in for a barbecue weekend and would be quite happy to buy any kind of lettuce to go with their beef burger or their sausage, or maybe even something made from plants nowadays. But the supermarket thinks they want baby gem, and the suppliers have run out of baby gem because it's been hot for 2 weeks, so they start flying it over from California, and you think, oh my God, it's entirely insane. What a bonkers food system we've seemed to have created. And actually, why don't we what we almost what we give and what we can get? It's not a reduction in quality. We just seem to have these. It's back to that monoculture argument. We seem to just drink the same things, which is insane, really, isn't it? So
and a lot of that is. We were joking a few minutes before we came on that it was like therapy when we were talking to each other about the industry. But this is also probably a little bit of an insight into some kind of therapy session I need to have, because I think a lot of the reason why I'm even in this industry is because I grew up with my dad as a fruit and vegetable importer, many fruits that he was importing from all around the world and selling to the retail industry in the UK. And so from a very young age, I guess I just had a insight into this big industry. When I would go and see him at work in some of the warehouses, I'd see a huge amount of waste. He quite rightly would have me, working summer holidays to earn some pocket money, picking apples in the local orchards in Kent where we grew up, and picking these apples. I would see a huge amount of wastage as well. And so growing up in this environment where you just see the waste and you see us rejecting food, but you also see us flying food or shipping food from all around the world. And you just start to realize this is not sustainable if you start to, I think, appreciate the macro impact of that. There's no way that that's sustainable. And so, that's kind of what has always given me an acute curiosity into this world. And so then when Tristram sparked the idea of getting wasted on waste, it really kind of connected the dots for me. And I could see the opportunity for Toast to really cut through and start creating some significant impact.
Yeah, amazing. Well, that's a nice segue back into the beer. So look, I'll open one just for the sound effect. But what do you do? So
just for the sound effect.
Just for the sound effect. I might then accidentally drink it. This one's yellow, which is the same as my brand for my company, so I've chosen that one. But what do you do? Did it start with one beer, and how's it grown? You've now got I've just had an IPA. I don't know what this one is.
That one's the lager,
craft lager. You've got a good mix. We've got 4 or 5 in front of us now, which is fantastic. It is a Friday afternoon, so I think it's okay. But what did you start with, and has the range grown?
Yeah, we won't tell anyone that it's actually 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning. But,
exactly.
We launched with the Pale Ale. The Pale Ale has always been our flagship, and this beer Babylon from Brussels, that was a Pale Ale, and we had brewed by the Brussels Beer Project, really fantastic brewery. When Tristram sort of had this idea of trying to bring the concept to the UK, bring it to scale, they were incredibly supportive, collaborative, helping us get it started here in London. We did the first brew at the Hackney Brewery, and it's kind of grown from there. The Pale Ale was our only beer for about a year. We then did a crowdfunder to create a bit of cash flow for us to be able to brew the lager and the session IPA. And then about a year later, did another crowdfunder to help us launch the American Pale Ale.
Nice. Okay.
And so we've kind of stuck to a quite, small core range. We do quite a lot of collaborations. We brew with dozens of other breweries in the UK and around the world, where we're trying to get more, creative, brewing some delicious sours and wheat beers and saisons and all sorts, porters and stouts. But I guess because we're trying to focus on creating as much impact as possible, we need to appeal to where there's going to be the most market demand, which can be different to some craft brewers where they are trying to constantly experiment with the different beers that they're brewing for their sort of main target audience. For us, I guess our target audience is trying to reach a relatively mainstream consumer, trying to transition someone who might be more familiar with the big lager brands to kind of come across, drink our lager, packed with more flavour and creating more impact.
Okay. Is there a challenge around, I think, the sort of traditional perception of the kind of the sort of charity sector, I suppose, or the social cause sector, is that there was an inevitable reduction in quality of the product because of that. Yeah. On a personal level, I feel that's changed a lot. But has that been a challenge, getting people to understand that not only is this good, but it's actually a great?
I think thankfully product. Not. We were very, very aware of that, very self-aware. That's why when we started the business, these 4 founding principles. Number 1 was quality. We've won, sort of blow our own trumpet a little bit. We've won international beer competitions, gold medals. We're served in, Michelin-star restaurants. People like Marcus Waring have us in his restaurants. We're in other high-end restaurants like Ottolenghi. We've had the support and thumbs up from some outstanding chefs around the world where quality and taste is absolutely everything. It's not about brand. And so that has been, an amazing kind of moment for us, actually, when that started to sort of come through. Our first ever beer that we brewed, actually, was brewed on Jamie Oliver's TV show, his Jamie and Jimmy's Friday Night Feast TV show. And again, obviously Jamie Oliver's a PR guy, but at the same time, he's a brilliant chef. And he absolutely, from the first moment he tasted it, said, look, if this is crap, I'm going to tell you it's crap. I'm a chef at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
I'm no way just going to humour you.
Yeah.
And then he tasted it and in a very Jamie Oliver way said it was blooming delicious. And that, like for us, again, from that first moment was such an amazing, kind of kudos to realise that we were onto something that had to lead with quality, because you might be able to flog someone a beer on a story, which a lot of craft brewers do. A lot of it is about the story, the heritage, the local, but for us, we do have this impact story, but unless it tastes delicious, they're certainly not going to come back for a second or maybe a third.
Yeah, and it seems to be a really exciting time to see this, sort of social enterprise, I suppose. I was interviewing Jamal Azell. Do you know Jamal Azell from Change, Please?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Coffee?
Amazing. Yeah.
Only a couple of weeks ago, actually, and had the same
incredible
conversation around, phenomenal. His network now is crazy. But just around the quality of his coffee and sort of obsessed. So it's not like, please buy my coffee, it's not very good, but it does an amazing cause. It's this is absolutely shit hot coffee and it's stunning.
You're never going to build a business, on a kind of a sob story. And so for us, quality product. But consumers these days want something so much more than just the quality. Consumers want a product that is absolutely delicious at the right price point, and hopefully local, with a bit of a story, with some heritage, with some authenticity, and with some impact. And if you can tick all of those boxes, then it's an absolute no-brainer commercial success. And for us, we're a certified B Corporation. So as a B Corp, it means we put people, profit, and planet at the center of everything that we do. When it comes to planet, it's pretty obvious, I guess. We're a very much impact, mission-driven business. People, really trying to treat our team and our staff as brilliantly as possible, create an epic culture, and then profit. It's got to be sustainable. It's got to be a commercial success. Yes, we want to give all our profits away, but that doesn't mean that we're not for profit. If anything, we're more motivated by making profit than any, because we know the impact that profit's going to create. So obviously we pay ourselves, we pay the team. I guess we're probably not quite as competitive maybe as other beer companies might be. We don't offer big commission-based bonuses or anything like that. We want to be very authentic about the fact that the profits we're creating really will go to charity. And so it's got to stack up as a commercial success. We've got an amazing board of directors who offer us advice and support. One of our directors is Paul Lindley, who founded Ella's Kitchen baby food company. And he's the first to kind of say, unless you're leading with taste, you might as well forget it.
Absolutely. And that need for profit. I think, there's been this, I hope it's changing again, although I suppose it's you buy a yellow car and all you see is yellow cars, but I had a number of conversations recently about, fundamentally business has to make a profit, but that doesn't make it a bad thing. It's not all about fat cats. And there seems to be this sea change again around this kind of, social responsibility, social entrepreneurship, and going, we are a business, we need to make money, but look, the more money you make, the more of a positive impact you can have. And it's what you do with that money, I suppose, isn't it? And I know you've worked in this sector for a while, which we'll come on to, but do you feel like that's finally changing, and maybe the greed of London's history in the 80s and 90s, and that people now, there does seem to be again this sea change of recognising businesses' potential impact? I
guess what I don't know enough about to observe kind of objectively, but from our experience, it's hard to know. Is it us as the entrepreneurial founders of the business that are deliberately creating a impact mission-driven approach, or is it the fact that the consumer demands it, and therefore there's a business opportunity for the entrepreneur to create the solution? And I think at the moment we're at this exciting interconnect between the two, where we very authentically wanted to build a mission-driven business and could see that the consumer demand was there, so we carried on. I guess if we couldn't see that there was going to be consumer demand, we may have had enough common sense to think, well, let's not just waste all of our money starting up something that we might be banging our head against a brick wall for a little while here. Obviously, you need those pioneers that will bang their head against the wall and just relentlessly try to continue. But that's where I guess we've seen a really exciting growth on both sides. There's incredible mission-driven businesses in our space, like Ruby's in the Rubble, creating really delicious jams, chutneys, condiments, using fruits and vegetables that would have otherwise gone to waste, through to other companies like Dash Water. There's great technology companies now like Too Good To Go and Karma, that are apps that you can get on your phone and find really great meals close to you that would have otherwise gone to waste. So a hotel, for example, that's just finished serving a buffet breakfast and they're about to chuck it all away. You can maybe go and buy a huge plate of buffet breakfast for kind of £2. So you get a cheap breakfast, they get a bit of money, food doesn't go to waste, and it's kind of win-win-win. And so you're seeing all these entrepreneurial ventures now spring up. I think because maybe there's kind of less fat cat greed from the entrepreneur, but I think also because the entrepreneur can see those opportunities that consumers are demanding. Like there's a Mintel kind of industry report that came out a couple of weeks ago that talks about the fact that it's like 71% or something of UK beer drinkers would prefer to have a beer if they knew that it was creating positive environmental impact. It's a huge number, and that's gone up 20% since last year. The rate of growth in consumer awareness now around the environment and wanting products that deliver positive impact. Obviously, we call them kind of like a bar stool activist, where you're kind of, you don't want to create a lot of difference. Like if you go into the bar and you can see a product which might be a big global brand, and you can see another one that is creating impact, and they're at the same sort of price, and they're both available to you, of course you're going to choose that one. Like it's a no-brainer. And I guess that's what we're really realizing now, that consumers will very fickly kind of move away from a brand that they might have been loyal to for a long time to create more impact, and it's exciting.
Yes, I agree with you, and I'm still a deluded optimist, although I did open a craft beer bar a few years ago. Gosh, it was 6 years maybe I ran it at the end, and the frustration of, initially we refused to have any multinational beers. It was all, and I was like, thank goodness there's this incredible craft beer revolution.
Yeah.
And back to the, buy a yellow car, only see yellow cars thing. All I could see were these amazing beers, and we opened it up and we were like, yeah, it's only British, quirky, interesting craft beers from human beings, not from brands.
Yeah.
And the challenge of actually getting the consumer to move away from the big ones, the Heinekens and the Carlsbergs and the Estrellas and stuff of the world, was so much more painful than I imagined it to be. So I think the trajectory is positive, but I guess it's still a tiny part of the market. But I hope we are at that sort of sea change.
I think we are. I mean, definitely the craft beer market in general is massively eroding the big global breweries' sales. I guess the big global breweries are now buying up those craft brewers. So breweries like Beavertown, now owned by Heineken, Camden Town, now owned by Anheuser-Busch. So these kind of big craft, and I guess Brewdog is still relatively like independent in inverted commas, but has huge private equity backing to probably one day sell. And so it's, they've got the backing of big global beer. I don't know whether it's a bad thing, like bringing really good quality craft beer to the masses and eroding really crap beers sales is a great thing. And if the big beer companies realize that and it's a commercial opportunity, then great. I guess for us, because we're so much more than just any craft beer, we're very agnostic as well as to how we will achieve that growth. Like whatever opportunities we can seize to achieve the global scale that we want to achieve to create as much impact as possible, we're very open to. Of course, we want to build our business independently and on our own, and be in control of our own destiny. But if opportunities came along to partner with big global breweries, we'd be very open to it if that will create more impact. I guess our vision one day, so we use 1/3 surplus bread in the production of the beer. Our vision one day is to see every beer in the entire world brewed with maybe 5% surplus bread, 95% malted barley. There is no way whatsoever you would be able to tell the difference in a Heineken, let's say, if that had 5% bread replacing 5% of the barley. You just would not be able to tell one bit. And so, if we can try to make the big beer industry see this opportunity, that's what we're trying to do. Because we've open sourced our recipe, that's been downloaded 50,000 times. We actively want the industry to work with us to take it on. So yeah, we're the last to be kind of judgmental, I guess, about big beer because there's a potential to make impact, and big beer has its place as well. Don't get me wrong, I'll definitely go and drink a Heineken and enjoy it on a sunny afternoon.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I've spoken to some brewers, a few that have been on the podcast, who said actually, that stepping stone, they needed the big guys to make a beer that got them interested enough in beer to go, where do I go from here? In the same way that I've spoken to people who've said, you start with your cup of instant coffee, you move on to maybe a supermarket, you end up in Costa's or Starbucks, and ultimately you end up in some sort of quirky independent. So it is, it's sometimes a journey. The key thing for me with this podcast, and the whole reason for doing it, is so that we're not completely dominated by the big brands. It's deliberately called the humans of hospitality, not the brands of hospitality, for a reason. And that's because much as I respect their existence, and I think the opportunity to work in partnership with them where it makes sense is great, but fundamentally, let's make sure that the world is interesting in a rainbow and not beige, and we don't all die of boredom because they're all the same. So.
And I think where it's quite fun is that consumers, thankfully, are becoming so much more aware of the kind of the bullshit that exists, and brand managers that are tasked with coming up with an authentic new brand. That is just a complete oxymoron for a brand manager and a multinational 100%. To come up with an authentic brand story. That is just so ridiculous. How can the big multinationals not appreciate that? Yeah. And luckily, I think they're starting to crash and burn and fail. And that's exciting. But what that means for the success stories that get snapped up, I don't know. That obviously dates back to kind of, Ben & Jerry's getting bought by Unilever, Innocent getting bought by Coca-Cola. It's a
but
challenge.
do enough good stuff, the bigger the company, the more money you create, as long as there's some more, you can maintain that authenticity and integrity of the founders or the board or the MDs or whatever, who then do invest the cash, then the more money the better. Look at Bill Gates. He seems to be doing some fairly good stuff with the money that he made off the back of Microsoft. He's traveling the world trying to solve malaria and toilets and all sorts of weird and wonderful things. Great.
And we'll both be billionaires one day, right?
100%, without a shadow of a doubt. So going back to your journey a little bit, because this isn't a new sort of thing, this social entrepreneurship for you, is it? You and your wife both got a track record in it. A lot of this came from was it a mega moon you called it across Africa? Can you just explain why was it a mega moon and what were you doing in Africa and how did this journey start?
It was our mega moon. So my wife and I met at uni. I guess I imagined I would take a pretty typical path of becoming a management consultant or something dire. And I met Nikki and obviously had the hots for her, and one of my one of our mutual friends kind of said, Rob, maybe just stop being such a dick and do something a bit more kind of impactful, and she might actually show a bit of interest. And so, I ended up getting involved in some charitable projects at university, shamelessly.
I was going to say purely to woo.
But then it very much kind of caught the bug. And
you're not still pretending.
Ended up, no. Okay. That was the big joke at our wedding, actually, was that now that you've married,
go and get a job as a management.
You are basically just going to go and get a job at some big investment bank. And so, I ended up getting involved in lots of student volunteering, going out to Tanzania, where I started up a charity that's working, still exists now, delivering educational development projects in schools. It's all run by Tanzanian university students, because I ended up becoming this kind of UK university student volunteer, sort of real geeky sort of enthusiasm for student volunteering, and created this project called Read International, where Tanzanian university students build libraries in schools and then fundraise to donate books to those schools. And because of living and working in East Africa for a little bit, made lots of friends in and around East Africa that were also running really interesting projects. And so when Nikki and I got married, kind of said, let's take a mega moon traveling from Cape Town to Cairo. Let's go throughout Africa, find some of the most inspiring and interesting projects in Africa that we can profile, write a book about, because we were both fed up with the fact that so much of the perception of Africa was a continent full of war and famine and disease and corruption. And whilst a lot of those things do exist, there is a very, very different side to an incredible continent where there are incredible solutions to all of those problems, and very entrepreneurial ones, sustainable, commercial, but impactful. Economies growing quicker than pretty much anywhere in the world. And so we wanted to go and profile those stories. And so we had this amazing immersion in social enterprise and social entrepreneurship. And Nick, definitely Nikki, I can't say on a podcast that I co-wrote the book, because Nikki would definitely say she did like 99% of it, and I would just put the occasional comma in there. So we kind of co-produced, co-wrote this book called On the Up, and then when I came back to the UK, ended up running this organization called Ashoka, which is a global organization that supports social enterprise and social entrepreneurship, is a foundation that provides funding and basically that sort of management consultancy. So it's kind of a charity that provides consultancy and support to social enterprises. Everything from, advice on business planning, financial modeling, strategic development, fundraising, but always with a focus on how can you create as much systemic change as possible. So we were working with individuals that are trying to change the criminal justice system, the education system, healthcare, as well as food waste, when I met Tristram.
Yeah, and I'd never heard of it, but I was on the website last night having a look, and again, phenomenal. Where does Ashoka get its funding from? Who's funding?
Yeah, so big, whole range of places, individuals, a lot of just regular commercial entrepreneurs, philanthropists who have made a lot of money. People like Bill Gates, who have made a lot of money commercially, and realised that there was a certain number of kind of light bulb moments in their life that led them down this very commercial entrepreneurship journey, but appreciate that maybe if another light bulb had gone off, they could have easily gone down the same route that any one of the Ashoka social entrepreneurs have gone down, where they have all the skills and nous to have started up a big for-profit commercial entity. They're incredible entrepreneurs, but a light bulb moment probably happened to them typically in their childhood that meant that they had a this kind of bug that they couldn't let go of to tackle a big issue. Like one of the social entrepreneurs we profiled in Africa was this guy Bart, who started a project called Apopo, where he trains giant African pouched rats to detect landmines. And Bart's this kind of ex-punk rocker turned Zen Buddhist monk, originally from Belgium, lives in Africa. As a child, he made money breeding rats and mice. And then he was reading a magazine in his early 20s, when at the time he was a product developer, about Princess Diana and the work that she had been doing to tackle landmines. And the way that landmines were being tackled, you would use a dog, and a dog would be able to smell the explosive, the TNT. You'd then bring in a landmine clearance team to clear it. And he realized that rats had a really acute sense of smell, remembering back to his childhood. And so he built this entire social enterprise where he trains rats to detect landmines. They're light enough to never set off a landmine. There's a risk that dogs might. They also can be trained in Africa or Southeast Asia or Latin America, where landmines are most common, whereas dogs are typically trained in Europe or North America, flown out with their trainer. They'll only ever work with their trainer. A rat will work with anyone. You just have to give them a banana, and then they'll sort of jump through hoops.
Seriously, a banana?
Yeah. They'd do anything for a banana. And so, that's kind of one example of just this like incredible person who obviously this light bulb moment when he was in his 20s reading a magazine, but again, relating back to his childhood, where it's just like, oh yeah, I know that rats can smell like better than anything. So had this like whirlwind few years at Ashoka, supporting people like Bart, who we'd also like featured in our book, because half the people we wrote about were supported by this kind of mysterious organization, Ashoka, that sat in the background. Hadn't really come across it before starting to write the book.
So you didn't know them, but you ended up running them, is that right?
Yeah, well, so I ended up running the UK, I guess the UK part of it. So it was founded by an American guy called Bill Drayton about 40 years ago. He's seen as the the kind of godfather of social entrepreneurship, and pioneered, sort of coined the concept, and has built this kind of global network of jokers like me who try and our best to kind of support these incredible people. And then I guess I got kind of itchy feet, so having done that for sort of 5 years and seen all of these incredible ideas constantly surrounding me, as soon as Tristram had the idea of Toast, I just thought it's time to jump ship and actually dive in and start doing the hard graft again of building something. And so myself, Louisa, Julie and David, who were all involved with Toast from the very beginning and still are now, have kind of built this this business, this journey.
And this wasn't just a case of sort of, seeing an advert for a nice job and going, oh, look, there's a decent salary. This was literally balls on the line, kind of like you were investing in it. Was that a difficult conversation? Because
it's probably a hugely inappropriate photo, but there's a picture of my little boy with a bottle of the beer in his hand that I've got on my phone. It's a capped bottle. It's kind of a reminder because, we'd got it started as a kind of side hustle kind of thing where evenings and weekends we're providing some help and support. And then it was about 6 months in that I decided to kind of go all in. Louisa already had, Julie was on board, already had. And I was kind of thinking, okay, is it time to kind of go, all in? And realizing that I was definitely going to be spending all of my little boy's university fund to get the business started. And so kind of had that on my phone to remind me because, it was, I guess, a brave leap. You know what it's like.
Amazing.
It's hardly the industry where you're going to make your millions overnight in hospitality and food and drink. And so knew it was going to be the start of what would be a long journey. But 4 years in, it's been way steeper, the sort of growth trajectory than we ever imagined. And, now we're available in, restaurants and bars and pubs and big retailers all across the country and indeed internationally. So it's been a much, I guess, quicker journey than we'd imagined back then.
Yeah, exciting. And good to see, I think, the fact that it is, it's all in, isn't it? If you've had to put the money in, and have you got the university fees back yet? That's still work in progress.
The college fund is now sort of building up again. There's now I've got 2 little boys now, so since then Matty's come along, so now it's trying to kind of build the college fund for Thomas and Matty, and every so often I sort of threaten to dip into it again, and Nikki kind of says no, Rob. And we're lucky enough to now have external investors in Toast, so we raised a kind of a seed round of investment a couple of years ago, and we sort of, Tristram and I, had got to the depths of our pockets that we could possibly reach to, and we really needed more money to build the business at the rate that we could see the potential. Had quite a lot of fun actually raising investment. So we created this scheme that we called Equity for Good. It was really important that we realised that, if we're going to create equity value for shareholders, we want to make sure that that's going to create value, because for the first time, we realized that we were going to lose control over an area of the business where at the moment we have complete control over how we treat the staff, how we look at our supply chain, the product that we create, how we spend our profits. And if we were raising, let's say, £1 million into the business and the capital value would grow over the next 10 years and perhaps be worth £10 million, then this £9 million worth of value that we create for a shareholder could be spent on deforestation in the Amazon. And the net harm that we do as a business might actually be more than the net good, and maybe we should have never started in the first instance. So we kind of did a bit of soul searching.
You had a couple of beers when you realised, when you went on this journey of, shit, this is where the money could end up.
Probably. But no, we just realised that, we needed to kind of think about that. We needed to take that seriously. And so we created this contract, and so all of our investors have signed a contract that says that if we were to ever sell the business or they were to sell their shares, then any net capital growth that they create has got to be reinvested in other mission-driven businesses, other B corporations, other social enterprises, or if they want to, they can give it away to charity. But we would highly encourage them to reinvest it in other, for good businesses, the for good economy, and see that grow. So, that's kind of where we're lucky to have investors, and we've now created a structure that we're starting to share with other social enterprises to see whether they would take it on as well.
That's great. And that's not a crowdfunding concept. That's direct with investors.
No, at the moment we've done a couple of crowdfunding rounds where we've raised just cash flow, and we've done rewards, and people have managed to buy themselves a case of beer much cheaper than they would by helping us up front to give us a bit of cash flow, basically. That's been a really important part of our growth journey to date. But when we raised equity, we did that a little bit more just one-to-one with a few key folks. One of our investors is National Geographic. Really amazing to have them on board as an investor.
It's not bad, is it?
Yeah, so they have a big foundation, the National Geographic Society, an incredible foundation that has a big endowment, and so they've invested in the social enterprise to help us grow, create more impact. And because they would be investing as an endowment anyway, it's sort of a perfect model. And the Equity for Good principles, they're very happy to sign up to, because again, as a foundation with an endowment, they just want to grow the money that they can spend on more good things.
Yeah,
so
amazing. Yeah, it feels like a great fit in so many ways, and exciting again that there's now an opportunity, I suppose, for business to take on that trajectory.
Yes.
So coming back to Toast then,
yes.
you've got the idea, you've got the concept, it's great, but then you've actually got to start brewing beer. So you don't brew yourself, you work in partnership with
We work in partnership, yeah. So we have our own in-house brewer. So I continue to do home brew, but far from being a seasoned brewer at all. So we realized very early on we were going to need to bring in expertise. And so it's kind of a combination of contract brewing and kind of gypsy brewing. So we outsource the production to other breweries that we partner with that have excess capacity, which again is all part of our values. So rather than investing in our own brewery infrastructure, equipment, let's actually just find brewers that are maybe only operating at 70% capacity. Let's use all of the infrastructure and equipment because of the energy intensivity that would have gone into creating that in the first instance. Let's just use their equipment. It's not quite as romantic as you would imagine in the craft beer industry, where normally people like to have their own craft brewery. But I guess we're not trying to embrace romance. We're trying to be quite practical.
Well, it's more authentic, because one of the things I was thinking when I was doing the research last night is surely, it could be a loose argument if you said you're just going to take bread and then turn it into beer because it's more environmentally friendly, because you go, actually, the environmental impact of making beer, maybe you're better off actually just throwing the bread away. And then I went on a bit of a journey and it got a bit complicated, but I actually liked the fact that you were using spare capacity in other breweries.
Yes.
Like, actually, that feels a little bit more
authentic
in that way.
And also we do challenge it. We do so much soul searching constantly, because you're quite right to raise this point that, I wasn't
going to raise it until you
but as an environmental, I guess as a group of environmentalists, but as an environmental business, we do realise there is a certain challenge in trying to tackle an environmental issue with a consumer good, when consumerism is pretty much the root cause of environmental issues. I guess we have this pragmatism rather than dogmatism in the business, where we're quite pragmatic and realise that we drink beer. A lot of people do drink beer. Better to drink a beer that's more sustainable, environmental than one that isn't. That's why we open sourced our recipe and specifically have made it available to home brewers, because we'd much rather, instead of someone buying our beer, they actually go to their local bakery, ask for the surplus at the end of the day, brew it up, have a lot of fun. It is quite a lot of fun. You'll create a whole load of chaos and mess, and the first few brews will probably taste terrible, but you'll get there, and you'll have some really sour beer along the way. Don't drink that. But would much rather people embrace this very local economy and try and create and craft themselves. But we also appreciate that people do want convenience. And so by making our beer readily available, I think it is the right thing to do from an environmental stance. And then by partnering with brewers as well to use their excess capacity. So our in-house brewer will then go along and everything from doing the first few brews, maybe then taking a step back, letting the brewery just crack on, keep going back, a bit of quality control, as well as just like making sure that it's a continual improvement process as well. All of our beers, we're trying to continually get better and better, as well as getting better and better extract from the bread that we're using. So the ratio of barley to bread, we want to get obviously a bigger ratio of bread and yield as much beer as possible, so that we can create ever more impact. And so that's what a lot of our kind of in-house brewer does. We've not ruled out investing in our own brewery at some stage down the line. I don't think we will in the next kind of 2 to 3 years. There is this kind of economic case for the first time now. We're big enough that we perhaps should be considering it from a commercial perspective, but that then starts to contradict those principles that we started with. It's actually quite nice to sort of use the surplus capacity.
Unless you're getting enough buy-in, I suppose, from the breweries, because fundamentally you've got another middleman involved and they've got some costs, albeit they'd be your own cost if you built your own brewery, I suppose. But if they are also doing it with some sort of philanthropy kind of perspective, then I guess that helps. Are they?
No, I think we get. I wouldn't want to speak out of turn because I'm sure they would kind of say, "Look, you get pretty good rates,
amazing deal."
But no, we've always had quite a commercial arrangement with our brewers. So we're just moving brewery, so we've just outgrown who we've brewed with for the last sort of 18 months, 2 years. Walled Top in Yorkshire, fantastic brewery. We're just outgrowing them, so we're about to move to a new brewery. That's been a pretty commercial arrangement. They've been very good to us. Have created a lot of flexibility, but ultimately they've made decent commercial margin on the product. There's a couple of interesting examples. Brewdog have brewed a beer called Brewgooder. It's another kind of mission-driven beer company. They sort of brand themselves clean water lager, and all of their profits go to water projects in Africa. So again, another like mission-driven brewery, really cool. And Brewdog brew that at cost, and so that more of the profits can go to charity. So there are some really good examples of where breweries have done initiatives like that, and so hopefully one day we'll land an opportunity.
You need a big guy because I'm thinking of the brewers that I know and that I've interviewed, and they either don't, they don't have the spare capacity or the spare time. They're also, small scale entrepreneurs trying to make money in a tough industry, and realistically they just couldn't do it at cost. But you would think these big multinationals, but then they've got shareholders. It's complicated, isn't it? It reminded me when you were chatting. Then I'm a big fan of Patagonia as a brand, and what they stand for, and the fact that fundamentally he certainly if you believe the CEO and read his book, which is great, but ideally don't buy any of our stuff, and if you do buy our stuff, ideally buy once. Buy a jacket, make it last 20 years, send it back if it needs repairing. And you kind of get the impression that they believe that. I'm on their mailing list, and their mailing list never comes out with, here's our latest jacket, please buy one. It always comes out with, here's an opportunity for you to work on an environmental issue on your area. And I don't even think they mentioned the sales side, and I'm like, wow, it's incredible. So it is the same with the beer, isn't it? Like you say, we need a jacket. We need beer, but we like beer. If you can buy a beer, particularly on a Friday afternoon, then buy one that's doing some social good. And I do think you can't live on planet Earth and have no impact. And the joy of hospitality is, for me, the point of being on Earth is to sit around a table and break bread and drink some wine or some beer and have a conversation and eat some food, and it would be a shame if the for good market went so much that people just stopped living a life. It's kind of like, look, as far as we know, we're only here once, have a good time, and it's also not about instantaneous solution for me. It is about a trajectory, I think, isn't it? So nice to know.
We so fundamentally believe that the world is this incredible place that we should celebrate, trying to preserve and save, rather than getting all preachy and righteous and holier than thou. And what better than a craft beer to kick off the celebrations? It is so important that we approach it in a celebratory way. Otherwise, a kind of a dire sort of downbeat mindset, it's just no good for anyone.
Yeah, a bit like the national parks. I always remember, I must have studied this at some point, but the sort of honeycomb syndrome sort of idea of in a national park, you are actually better off. Certain aspects of it, certain parts of it need to be protected, and actually less people visiting it is good for the wildlife and the nature. But having a honeypot, having an area with a car park and a cafe and bringing a load of people in shows them how wonderful it is and how beautiful it is, and actually raises awareness around saving it and looking after it. And you almost need to bring people. And it's probably similar in the travel kind of thing at the moment of trying to get everybody, never get on an aeroplane again because it's going to destroy the planet. But actually, get on an aeroplane occasionally and see how beautiful the world is. Maybe will motivate you more to save it, rather than kind of us all putting our head in the sands and destroying it. But it's nuanced and it's complicated. And
it is a complicated one. I think for the first time, I'm starting to. I've got colleagues who are far stronger than I have been when it comes to sort of environmental decisions. For the first time, I'm stopping, getting on flights very consciously, thinking this is just unsustainable. We need to stop flying so much and really limiting trips and I guess holiday decisions where it is unsustainable just to hop on a flight for a weekend away. And so starting to just maybe wake up a little bit later in the day to the fact that this is crazy. We can't do this. And when you're running a business like Toast, again realizing, well, the impact I'm making in my business day to day, I might completely undermine if I then take a weekend break away in like the Mediterranean and fly. It's kind of like need to start questioning these.
It's really hard, and doing these podcasts, the journey that I've been on. I've dug up my garden and planted a load of planters and started growing my own vegetables, and I walked to the station this morning rather than taking the car because they're all, the more you have the conversation and realise the impact, you can't separate what you do in your life and what you do at work. River Cottage in particular, I was chatting to Stephen Lamb a couple of weeks ago, who's been at River Cottage pretty much since it started. And he was saying that as well. He's like, you can't really believe in organic, local, sustainable sourcing of food and then constantly go home and live on McDonald's, luckily, because that would be sad.
We all know you walked to the station because you were coming to Toast.
Yeah, exactly, because I thought I'm going to end the day on beer. I was saying earlier, but last time I was in this building, because you're in the same building as Canton Tea, which only went out a couple of weeks ago, actually, and I'm not going to say it was more fun. I did actually thoroughly enjoy tasting loads of teas, but going home with a couple of beers is even more exciting. So presumably off the back of this then, or at least hope that... this is an easier sell, because I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs in the food and hospitality sector, and nobody, very rarely do people go, this is super easy. But is this helping? Is it easier to rock up with a wholesaler or a brand and say, look, not only is this a great beer, but it's got this great story? Do you think that's making a difference now from how marketable this is? And how did you go about getting your first customers, and who were they?
So yes, definitely, it's much more. I would say sort of. Straightforward. Like it's a much kind of more opportunistic sell to retail and hospitality, to have a impact driven story that is so full of authenticity than maybe another craft beer, where right now is the best time to be alive if you like craft beer, because there is such good, delicious beer out there that it is very hard to compete on quality, I would say. If you want a beer that tastes delicious, then you are spoiled for choice. And then like how you might make the decision will probably come down to like the look, the brand, the story. Often it just comes down to a simple name like Camden Town, having a great name attached to it, this kind of locality and heritage. And so how you then kind of differentiate yourself with, obviously in our instance, sustainability and impact, which obviously wasn't our kind of intention to kind of use that as a kind of commercial opportunity, let's say, but it is, and people want it. People really kind of want to then bring it in. There's a big kind of corporate responsibility message for a big retailer like Tesco's, who stock our beer, very proudly stock the beer because of their sustainability credentials. And Tesco's, it's kind of an unusual one in some respects. People would think it's an unusual one for us to stock our beer in Tesco's, but Tesco's have really pioneered fighting and raising awareness about food waste. They're the best retailer in trying to tackle this issue. And so whilst, on the sort of surface level, you might be like, it's a bizarre decision for like a small kind of growing craft product to instantly be in Tesco's. But we're really proud to make that association. And then we're also in, like Waitrose. We were the supplier of the year to Waitrose last year, which is amazing considering some of the suppliers that go in there. And again, based on our sustainability story. And we're then also, served in places like, Ottolenghi, and we're launching in Oaxaca next week. And we've been served in, we're in the Hilton hotels, and we work with a big sort of hospitality group called Compass Group, which is huge, biggest global hospitality business in the world, and they're doing big stadiums, and will be in the Excel Centre and Olympia next year as one of the kind of main beers and things like that. It's kind of like incredible to kind of to be on this journey. I think what's probably more challenging, and we are aware of, is that it's all very good and it's easy to get yourself kind of onto the shelf, into the bar, into the fridge, on tap. It is much harder to get the consumer to then pick it off the shelf, pick it out the fridge, ask for it on tap. Like you were saying, they might still look to the Heineken or the Carling or the Carlsberg or the Brewdog or the Meantime. And unless you've got the brand awareness, it's tough. And so that's still, of course, a learning curve we're on, and all consumer goods, especially startups, are on, is kind of how to build that brand awareness.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, isn't it? I was having the same conversation with Jamal, because when I spoke to Jamal from the coffee, I was kind of like, well, okay, so it sounds like everybody should buy your coffee because you're investing the money in so much good stuff, getting homeless off the street. And I chat to you and I think, okay, well, everybody should buy your beer because it's food waste. But I know people, I know my local coffee roaster, and I know my local bread maker, and I know my local craft beerman, and I know how much work and how much passion and how much energy they put into it. So I actually love the fact that, hopefully both can exist. And that Jamal was very much kind of like, yes, we recognise we can't supply everybody with coffee, but opening up the concept and saying that if other people will have this kind of social conscience, I suppose, and do a similar thing, that's going to help. And the fact that you're working with the big guys, then I would hope anybody, walking into a supermarket where you exist next to somebody else, they buy from you. But I suppose the flip side of when they walk into that bar, that they also support that local. Yeah,
and it's also like whether they, I'm quite right, of course they, and there's, the market is big enough that there is plenty to go around. And so it's just whether they recognize you, it's whether they know who you are, it's whether they know our story. Obviously, that's why it's an amazing opportunity to do a podcast like this. And we've been very lucky to attract quite a lot of media interest and attention because we want people to understand that when they're looking and it says toast and it's planet saving and we're celebrating change, that they understand that there is this impact that sits behind the product, and we hope that they will first experience the delicious taste and then discover this story and hopefully become a fan for life. But you still need them to pick it out for the first time and discover those things and experience the flavour. And so that's what's tough, is just to kind of crack the nut to begin with.
Yeah, like you say, in a way, and the reason I started this podcast was I think when people are consciously aware of something, I was all too aware that people in the UK were subconsciously, spending their money in places that ended up making the high street very beige and very boring and very dull. Because I think consciously people want this diversity and this richness and to support all these good causes. But when they're walking down the high street and they see a branded kind of coffee shop or restaurant or whatever, they walk into it just without thinking about it. And the point of these conversations is to make people aware. I keep looking at your label, trying to think, what is it that makes it jump off the shelf? And it's interesting that you've got Here's to Change on yours, and Jamal was all about change, please.
Yes,
and maybe that story around.
We just underwent a complete brand refresh. We were leading with kind of toast brewed with bread and felt like that was our USP, and realised that in many ways that isn't our USP. Our USP is something so much bigger. It's our broader, bolder kind of epic vision to try and change the entire beer industry and change the world. That's what we're actually aspiring for. The fact that it's brewed with bread is almost like the means to an end rather than the end in itself. And so... And also the brewed with bread, we did occasionally get feedback where people were like, does that mean it's more calorific? Like, what? Like, is that just a gimmicky thing that you're brewing with bread? And we're like, no, it's surplus bread.
Why bread is the issue, isn't it? Not...
Exactly. So it's kind of, it's that lead with the why or whatever it is, that kind of marketing speak. And so we've been sort of through that process recently, and so proud of where it's landed. And we saw our rate of sale in the big retailers that we're in go up 300% overnight when we launched the new brand.
Really?
Absolutely
Because of
mind-blowing.
Here's to change, or just
We moved from bottle to can, so that could be an aspect, and then launched the new look, bolder colours, clearer labelling. That it's kind of
power of branding.
Really interesting, that power of branding.
Yeah. That was with a branding agency or something, was it? Or?
It was, yeah. So a really great agency called B&B, just to give them a plug because they are great. Did a really good job, and
they charge you.
They did. They charged us mate rate, like sort of a social enterprise kind of rates. They were really kind to us to give us a decent rate, and it was the toughest thing. We went through. We did work with a couple of other brand agencies where we were just making no progress because we just couldn't capture the essence of this. We always describe it as basically this epicness that we strive for. We just couldn't get across. A brand that I have huge respect for is Tony's Chocolonely. I don't know whether you've interviewed them. Have you had a bar of Tony's?
No.
Oh, you need to, Mark. It's so good. It's going to change your life.
Really? Why?
If you go and buy it in, I think they're like Sainsbury's, Waitrose. I think are their biggest retailers.
They're at Waterloo Station. I'll be getting some on the way home.
Dutch chocolate bar, chocolate business. Absolutely incredible chocolate. Again, I guess why I like it is because I can see some similarities, but they're getting it even better than we are. The flavour is just outstanding. So in a, I guess, crowded market where chocolate is very competitive, but they stand out. They are so good. It is quite a premium price, but you're willing to pay for it because it's also this experience. You open up the chocolate bar and it's like a Willy Wonka type experience. It really is. They're kind of the way they've designed the whole bar and how it's not in squares, it's all in these kind of funky shapes. And they're really sort of raising awareness and fighting sort of anti-slavery, obviously fair trade, things like that. But a real mission behind it as well. And
what are they called again, sorry?
Tony's Chocolonely.
Okay, I'm going to check them out without
highly recommend it.
Where are they based?
So Dutch-based, and they've just launched in the UK about a year ago.
Cool. I was going to say Humans of Hospitality hasn't been abroad yet,
but they
it's getting closer.
Booming. Like it's just one of those brands that is, you will start to see it everywhere. It's the yellow thing. It's the kind of, you will see it everywhere now.
Yeah. Okay. So on your journey, you've also started to look overseas. So the US market has come up. Is that right? How did that come about? What are you doing to go global?
Yeah. So we, when we launched 4 years ago, the Jamie Oliver TV show, everything was just bonkers and had incredible media coverage. And we started getting interest from all around the world. Very genuinely, every day, every other day, we were getting inquiry from somewhere in the world where they wanted to start up Toast because we were in Australian news, Indian newspapers, sort of South Korean TV and all sorts. It was crazy. We, in hindsight, made unstrategic decisions to snap up some of those opportunities. We are very transparent as a business and we are very open about some of the success that we've had, but also the mistakes that we've made along the way. And we launched in Iceland, was the first place we launched. Not the biggest market in the world. Probably would have been better to kind of, go deep and go for Bournemouth, a much bigger population than Iceland. But, you live and learn. So we kind of franchised the idea to Iceland. We franchised the idea to South Africa, to Brazil, to Ireland. And we've basically partnered up with local breweries there who take the brand, brew it locally. We'd never want to export the product, given our environmental credentials, got no interest in just stacking it up and shipping it around the world.
Let's just send it by sail.
Oh, that's true.
I interviewed a guy not long ago as well, Sail Cargo Alliance, and it was fascinating to hear that how much stuff they're trying to get shipped around the world by sailing boat, so zero carbon impact. But not only that, above deck, they were working with sort of mental health charities and working with kids and stuff and trying to teach them about the power of being outdoors and all that kind of stuff. So if you ever do it, sail it around the world. But anyway, sorry, I interrupted.
No, but that is cool. But of all the products to ship around the world, beer is definitely not one of them. It is such a ridiculous product to ship around the world. It's so heavy.
Yeah.
It's
water is the most ridiculous. But yes, beer is close behind.
Yeah. Hopefully there's not much water shipped around the world, but there probably is, isn't there?
No, there is. There's French water available in supermarkets.
Okay, so that really is even more bonkers.
Bonkers.
And obviously Coca-Cola understands that, they franchise the idea. That's all made locally all the way, all around the world. They would never ship Coca-Cola around the world, not for environmental reasons, obviously, when they started, far more commercial. But there are some environmental advantages to the fact that they're no longer doing it. And some of the big breweries as well will license the idea, and there'll be local breweries that are kind of producing the beer. And so we kind of wanted to learn from that, see if we could partner with local craft breweries. But we realised that quite quickly, I guess, that and so we're really dialing back on that at the moment. We're just not big enough to do it justice. We are still, there's so much growth potential in the UK. We're still a small craft beer brand in the UK. The growth opportunity to create impact here is so much higher than, we were so impact driven, thinking go to South Africa, go to Iceland, go to Brazil, snap up these opportunities, say yes, let's create more impact, let's tackle local bread waste, let's tell the story. But commercially, it was ridiculous. It was like not making any money. We're having to put in so much energy and time and resource to building a brand story and another market on the other side of the world. We didn't like fly out there or anything. And again, that makes it tough. Like we launched a business in South Africa and none of us ever went out there. Launched a business in Brazil, none of us ever went out there, because it would have been so daft to kind of jump on an airplane to launch an environmental business on the other side of the world. And so we're trying to do everything differently. And it turns out there's kind of some rationale as to why maybe differently in this instance didn't work. And so we are dialing and scaling some of that back. Where there's still an ongoing kind of question mark is we also launched in America. So we launched in America a couple of years ago, launched on the 4th of July, which we thought was hilarious as a British company.
Yeah.
We're back.
Yeah.
And that was and has been amazing in some respects, but also incredibly challenging in other respects. The most challenging aspects I've had in 4 years of Toast have been the business challenges we face in America. So when we first launched, we launched nationally we launched across New York in Whole Foods. We're still served there. We're served in places like Shake Shack. We're in the Lincoln Center, the Guggenheim, the Met. We're in the Barclays Center, big stadium venue. We've got some incredible stockists in New York. But making money in the New York beer industry and the US beer industry is so difficult, because you have to work with a distributor who's instantly taking like 30% of your margin, and our margin is pretty much 30%. So you're kind of instantly like stripping out
Deliveroo and Uber in my world, in the restaurant world, exactly the same. 33%, never made 33% of my life.
No, exactly. And so it instantly takes out your margin. But you have to, you're legally obliged to, you cannot deliver product to Whole Foods unless you go through a wholesaler. And so because we're also, we're not moving beer from here, so we have to set up a local partnership in New York, brew locally. So we've got no economies of scale on production. Then the wholesaler is taking their cut. And then we've had opportunities to then expand nationally. So Whole Foods have said they would love to take us nationally. Companies like Total Wine, which is the kind of Oddbins, Majestic kind of equivalent in America, big off license, would love to take us nationally. But every state that you expand to, you then have to find a new wholesaler. You have to set up as an entity. You've got to file your finances, your tax return in that state. So every single state is different to even like the European Union, although depressingly that won't
oh, don't go there. We've done well.
Won't start getting political. The joy of the European Union, the fact that we've got this free market on our doorstep, and you can grow and operate in France as if it was Wales, and it's incredible. And I thought America would be far more free and easy than that, but it turns out no. Every state is so separate and independent, and it is, if we'd have done a fraction of research before we entered the US market, I don't think we would have done. And there's a reason why there's not that many British beer industry, British beer businesses in America scaling and succeeding, because it is a very challenging market. So we're really weighing up at the moment what decision we should take, because the amount of time and effort and energy that's going into the American business, if we spent on the UK business, and we're growing at 100% year on year in the UK, realizing that we should just wait until we're far bigger, much more money in the UK, then perhaps we can nail America properly. But at the same time, we've got amazing opportunities in America.
It's tricky.
Big beer market, huge food waste, opportunity to create big impact. And so it's this kind of ongoing sort of challenge at the moment that we're trying to grapple with.
Isn't it? Yeah, because I would agree. Often in business, it's what you say no to is even more important than what you say yes to.
Yeah.
However, you'd like to think often that's a case of investment. And where it's interesting is if you've got the resources to employ an American specialist. Then you can grow quicker. So if you're self-financed and you're having to grow organically, then absolutely say no. But if you've, I don't know, if there's enough people who are investing and can see the potential and your messaging is so great, I don't know, it feels like there should be an opportunity. How good was that round of financing that you did? Who's the person with deep pockets behind the scenes?
And that's what we need to sort of think through is, and again, like, do we want to raise more? We definitely would need to raise more money to really launch a consumer goods business in America, because it is so fragmented. It's a very local industry, actually, or a very local market, despite the fact that you would imagine quite a lot of homogenous high streets. But the UK is way more homogenous. Like, our high streets are all so uniform, and you've got these big national like bar and restaurant and retail brands that are all exactly the same, and you go to one high street and it's exactly the same as another. America isn't like that. Very pro-local.
I'm not sure how.
Very pro-regional. There's only kind of, even examples like Walmart are few and far between. Like, there's not that many national, and they certainly don't have things like the pub industry that we have here. And again, like, there's only a handful of pub companies that control the tens of thousands of pubs that we have in the UK. That is totally different in the US. There is no such thing. Every single bar is pretty much independent. And so it's much harder to get that economy of scale where you could have one relationship manager to coordinate, 300 Waitrose stores. You just can't do that in the US. So challenging environment.
I was chatting to somebody yesterday, and I can't remember who it was, but and this is going to be factually incorrect, but in essence, the gist of the conversation was that there was hardly a McDonald's in Texas, but there was an equivalent to McDonald's. So they had their own version of a kind of burger shop that had done well. But there was only sort of one or two McDonald's. Whereas your presumption is there's one on every street corner. And
I was really surprised to hear state success stories. They're really proud of, and then there's a lot of barriers to then going beyond your state, as we are experiencing a lot of barriers to going beyond New York, because it's just so cost prohibitive. You're basically starting all over again. Wow. So kind of.
Fascinating. You mentioned Shake Shack, by the way, just now. Do you sell to Shake Shack in the UK as well?
We actually don't know, only in the US. That we sort of have more success there, but obviously it's an American brand.
Do you know Danny Meyer?
So we've been really lucky to kind of have some support from Danny Meyer. I wouldn't say I know him well. But we have some support from him, on a personal level. He knows who we are, what we're up to, and
he's my sort of hospitality hero, Danny. So Miranda, who helps me produce the show, I've said, when you've got Danny on the podcast, Miranda, then I know that we're doing well. So put in a good word.
I'm sure he'll. His hospitality empire is growing, and his kind of Union Square kind of group is pretty amazing. And another person in America, Dan Barber, is an incredible sort of mission-driven chef, incredible chef, and he's been a big supporter and champion of what we're doing as well. He's a big sort of food waste fighting advocate.
Yeah, amazing. It's just general ethos on hospitality is spot on. Was it hard to get the B Corp accreditation, by the way? Was that challenging?
Yes, it is actually much harder than we arrogantly thought when we first started. We were kind of like,
you've learned so many things in arrears.
This will be a tick box exercise of just like tick, tick, tick. And then it turns out, we had so much to learn, which is great. That's the best thing about B Corp, is that you are learning all the time. And there's businesses that are doing things so much better than we are at certain aspects of the business. And so going through the process, we learn a lot and then continue to learn loads now.
Yeah, they keep coming up, and I keep meaning to look into it in a little bit more detail. I know you have a PDF that shows the impact you've had of how many slices of bread you've saved, and it's got various stats on it. Are there any that you've memorised that you remember as to say what your impact is? A little bit of a test. But,
I think the easiest one, to be honest, is the fact that we've now brewed over 1 million slices of bread that would have otherwise gone to waste, and nearly 2 million now. Our BHAG, do you know BHAG, Big Hairy Audacious Goal? Yes. So our BHAG we have as a business is 1 billion slices. So we've done some kind of back of a napkin calculations, and using various kind of very geeky kind of tipping point theories. If we can get to 1 billion slices, then that means we've affected enough of the industry to hit a tipping point that would mean that hopefully the entire industry would start to shift and it would become normalized. So we've got a long way to go, seeing as we've only done 2 million, but that's where we want to get to, and amazing. That will be kind of our 15-year BHAG. We hope we get there by about 2035.
Wow, yeah, I can see the challenge with the US then, because that would speed up that. Is Tristram still involved, by the way?
So he is involved, just not. He's never had to be in on a day-to-day basis. So as a kind of an environmental campaigner, he also realised that starting up a kind of consumer goods business that might be sort of selling into some of the big retail that he's constantly been a thorn in the side of, there would be a degree of irony in that. And so he's always wanted to remain quite independent and impartial. Sits on the board. Obviously we check in on a weekly basis, but no, isn't involved day to day.
Okay. What's his main thing that he's working with? Is feedback? Is it the
so feedback and also just independently campaigning around environmental issues was a big part of the whole Extinction Rebellion movement as well. Yeah,
okay. Well, there's a nice little segment.
Normally when I'm like trying to have a meeting with Tristram, it's kind of trying to sort of make sure that he's not being arrested by someone for campaigning outside of like Whitehall or something. I'm like, Tristram, please don't get arrested.
Excellent.
No, he's brilliant. He's like the most authentic kind of campaigner and environmentalist.
Okay. Well, there's another one. Got to get him on the podcast one day.
Yes, 100%.
But that links in slightly, because I think it was you guys. I'm very much aware of... hospitality as an industry in general has a reputation for making people work too hard and chefs behind the scenes, doing too many hours. But I'm conscious also that anytime there's a company that's got such a great ethos and such a great mission, just means that people end up going all in. And I'm sure it was you that I was reading about, where you were doing some work around trying to get rid of a hierarchy. And it reminded me, funny enough, of Extinction Rebellion.
Yes.
So am I right in saying that you've been putting quite a lot of effort into kind of the behind the scenes of how the team works? Yeah. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and we're very open. Again, we're probably too transparent about everything, but something we're very open about is that, as a B Corp, we talk and have signed up to the fact that people, profit, planet are all central to every business decision that we make. The people and the planet side, the profit and the planet side, I think we really nailed it along the way, and we've done pretty well there. The people side, we've made really bad mistakes along the way, and we've been guilty of people burning out. We've been guilty of not taking our culture as seriously as we should be. We've been guilty of, I think, rhetoric and talking up this kind of epicness that we've never lived up to. And it really came to a head earlier this year where, a couple of people left the business, and we had a real kind of eye-opening moment where we're just realizing, hang on here, like if we're trying to talk about this like epicness and this culture that's so incredible, why on earth would people leave? And we did quite a sort of traditional kind of consultation, I suppose, of just asking everyone in the business very openly and honestly, like what's the crack? Like what are the things that are good and what are the things that are not so good? And just did very simple listening. And on the whole, obviously everyone was very positive. I think we're, to a certain extent, we're pretty hard on ourselves, because certainly the culture was good, but just not great, was not epic, was not what we'd like aspire it to be. And obviously we're still on a learning curve, and we're almost certainly not there yet. But just realizing that, yes, we are a fast growth consumer goods business, and we do need to take seriously what we pay our team. Even if we are mission driven, we need to remain competitive so that people don't leave for a maybe more commercially driven, profit minded competitor. We need to make sure that we invest in our training and our development. We're on a steep learning curve, and we've grown quickly over the last 4 years. Let's train up and support the people that joined us early, that joined a very different business to where we are now. And if we really believe in people, then we have to invest in that rather than just ignoring where there might be challenge. We moved office, moved here to a much more sort of conducive, effective, I think, sort of working environment. And so, we've kind of had challenge along the way. It's been the toughest part, actually. Like about 6 months ago, as well as kind of America headaches. It was probably like people headaches that were also kind of, for me, like some of those things, we were like, just not getting it right, like really need to nail this. And so we brought in some brilliant external advice and support. And yeah, over the last probably like 3 months, have just started to absolutely get it right. And it's so good. Amazing. I mean, it's just common sense, isn't it? But like when your team's like operating in like harmony, the business just starts to flourish. And we already were doing pretty well, but now it's kind of just absolutely, soaring. So yeah, simple things. I think honest, reflections on where we need to do better.
Okay. It is the hardest bit, managing people. And, I think if you're a good human and fundamentally you want to do good for the world, you really want people to have a great life, but you have the commercial reality of, you think a great life is just related to pay, and it's not anyway. But even if it was, there's a limited resource to invest in people. Yep. I was saying to you earlier, I've just come out of interviewing the guys behind Honest Burgers, and they've got 777 staff now, apparently, which is a very convenient number to remember. And that was their biggest challenge at the moment is, again, they were doing so much good stuff and there was so much authenticity and integrity behind the brand. But the bit they were, they just felt they were probably compromising more on than they were comfortable with was the challenge around low pay industry, high hours, antisocial hours, and how do they look after their team, I guess. Are there any specific things you've actually done, apart from recognise the issue, but any specific changes that you've made that have had an impact?
So again, me talking now about transparency, we weren't being as transparent, I don't think, as we should have been internally about certain aspects of just good governance. Again, really boring businessy stuff, but just, it is really important. And so I, as CEO, would go to board meetings representing the sort of, decisions that we're making as a business from sales and production and marketing and brand. But, we have a brand marketing director, we've got a sales director, we've got an ops director, and let's just all represent as a leadership team at the board meeting. That's going to help me not shoulder so much of a burden. It's going to help them feel way more engaged and empowered. It's going to help their teams be much closer to that decision-making process as well. And we're not even a big team, so it kind of just makes sense to have that degree of transparency and connection to where big strategic decisions might be made, and then filtering that down to the whole team, where every month we have a kind of an in-depth 2 to 3 hour team meeting where we go through all of the finances completely transparently, all of the big business decisions very transparently. We're trying to be a completely transparent business and open up absolutely everything, using processes obviously like using just key tools like Slack and Asana to kind of make sure that everything's managed transparently. Everyone can see my tasks as well as like seeing, someone a bit more junior maybe than myself and all of their tasks, just this complete transparency. Trying to eliminate hierarchy, we found that quite tough. So we've kind of explored that whole area of how you do break down and have flat structures. And create more efficiency, because if you're just managing someone to deliver what they're doing and you're just asking them if they've done it, it's kind of a complete waste of everyone's time. If everyone just understands where you're going and you trust and train and support everyone to get there, then you just avoid unnecessary line management, which is very costly and such a bureaucratic kind of bullshit area of business. We've tried to eliminate it. We haven't yet done it. We haven't figured out what's the right structure for us. But by creating very open, transparent, objectives and meeting environments and structures, it's helping. We've also given everyone in the business shares in the business to make sure that everyone has ownership and genuine skin in the game and equity to have a kind of understanding of where we are going. It's kind of, and we're all signed up to the Equity for Good principles, obviously. Of course. So that if we were to ever realise any capital value from our shares, we will all be starting up some kind of awesome impact investing foundation or something.
Yeah, amazing. Was that complicated because the giving people shares has tax implications? Did you end up doing the flowering kind of share?
Just EMI, kind of just used EMI sort of share schemes. It's all pretty straightforward, they sort of then means that you don't have capital gains tax and stuff like that. So good. Really simple structures out there. And again, just learning a lot from the B Corp community, where there's brilliant businesses that we can learn from and try and figure out how to take the best bits that suit us.
Nice. You've mentioned a number of the lessons, I suppose, you've learnt, or some of the challenges I suppose you face? Any key ones that jump out where you go, okay, we learnt that, that's definitely going to change. We won't do that again going forward. We'll do this.
Yeah, I guess obviously I've already sort of talked about, I think that the most important, because the most important for us have been branding, where we've learned, I guess it's very business jargon, but like pivoted and made important changes and are now popping off the shelf much more. The people and the culture side, where again we've had a good culture, but not as epic as we'd want it to be. And we've made improvements and changed rather than just accepting it. We also grew internationally too quickly. And again, I think there's always been this mantra actually that I learned years ago, which again is probably very cliche, but it's this whole like fail fast mentality.
Yep.
And I think that it is so important to fail fast, to realize as quickly as possible where you are going down a rabbit hole or the wrong track. The international stuff, I fear maybe is still the case. The fact that we're still in America, I do still wonder, like, is this the right decision or not? That's the one that's still like unknown. Mm-hmm. The opportunity is massive. We've got amazing contracts there. Business in many ways is booming, but just wondering and niggling in the back of my mind is that the sort of thing that you reminisce on in like 15 years time and say, because we all know it's too early. Of course I know it's too early. We're a small British business launching in America. Like all the cliche examples are there that is not what you should be doing. But at the same time, you also don't know if in 15 years time you're reminiscing on like, that was the bravest decision we ever made, was like launching in America, or is the bravest decision we ever make shutting down America and re-entering in a few years' time. So I think the biggest, boldest learnings we're probably yet to come across. And I think those reflections that I've shared already are probably the key ones. There's been some like very comedy ones as well, where we've just any consumer goods business would kind of I think appreciate the ridiculousness of it, where we'll kind of launch new labels and we're in such a rush to kind of get a product out to market or something that like you don't even get proofs like mocked up and then they're kind of labeled on and then the product's sent to you as a final thing and you've got tens of thousands of them and you're like, oh shit, it looks terrible. And you're like, how the hell are we going to flog this? And we've definitely done things like that in the past as well, that thankfully you can laugh about now, but back then are the most stressful moments. Like, oh my God.
So many times. Yeah, it's a challenge. Well, look, thank you for your honesty and just sort of explaining, warts and all. It's that I love that authenticity. I think it's so important in your kind of sector, but I just think in business in general now, I think people buy into businesses that are honest and open and share it. And we're the same in our business. It's kind of open book management, warts and all. We tell the story because it's fun. We're all in it together. I would struggle with your American dilemma as well, because the entrepreneur in me goes, oh bloody hell, that's exciting. There's a buzz there. There's an opportunity. Even though you constantly get told, focus and say no to stuff. If the opportunity's there, it's hard. So I'll watch that with fascination and wish you luck with it. For people who want to follow the story, where's the best place to go? Particular social media channel or website?
Yes, please. So follow, like, and share, and all the rest. Whatever floats your boat. At Toast Ale is our kind of handle, and then toastale.com is our website. Because we're now best friends, and you've endured me harping on for probably over an hour, I will share a discount code, which is I know Rob, and if you put that on our shop, you'll get a nice little Brucey bonus discount. So if you've got this far, you deserve it, and you deserve a beer. Please do support it and follow it and share it on social media. We are building up our kind of following. We need people like you to get behind the business, get behind the cause, and hopefully we will one day be much, much bigger than Heineken. And
come on, and we'll both be billionaires.
That's the master plan. And we raise a toast and save the world and celebrate what it is to be fighting food waste with this delicious product.
Amazing. I love that discount code. I know Rob. That's a perfect one. Even I'll remember that. So, and I do know Rob because you've just spent the last hour and a half talking to me. So thank you. Best of luck with it. We'll keep in touch.
Cheers.
And thank you for spending the time. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's podcast, and remember that on the website humansofhospitality.co.uk every week we put on some show notes and some links through to the various websites or social media that are mentioned, and we also do a nice little breakdown of that week's conversations into specific topics, so you can jump through the podcast and just listen to some of the highlights if you wish. If you've not done so already, if you could leave us a review on iTunes or one of the other podcast players of your choice, that would be hugely appreciated. Thank you so much, and we'll be out with another episode next Monday.